"Don't move. Follow me." The boy spoke so softly it was almost just a breath, but it made Augustus Hale stop short in the middle of the lobby of the building, bearing his very own name. An 11-year-old boy, the son of the driver he had just buried 3 weeks ago. He was gripping his sleeve tightly. Right at the moment he was about to step into the private elevator to go up to the meeting room to decide his entire empire. A few minutes ago, no one in that glass lobby looked at the boy. The guard had twice chased him away to sit elsewhere. To the whole building, the child of the old driver was an invisible child. Yet now he was blocking the path of the most powerful man in this place. The small, trembling hand clutched the sleeve, and he repeated, even more softly, "Follow me. Please, sir." Gus almost brushed his hand away. He was late. But that sentence made him freeze, because in the world there was only exactly one person who had ever said those words to him, in another place, a lifetime ago, and that person was now lying in the grave. The elevator doors remained open, still waiting, patient and inanimate. Before we begin, if you believe that sometimes the person who saves us is exactly the one we least expect, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so that every week you don't miss a story about the people that life seems to have forgotten. Stay with me until the last minute, because what that child heard in the darkness the night before will change everything. And now, let's go back with me to that winter morning in Chicago, where it all began. It was so cold that breath froze into white smoke right upon getting out of the car. Augustus Hale stepped down from the black sedan, pulled up his coat collar, and stopped for a second on the sidewalk to look up at his building. 42 stories of glass and steel, reaching straight into the leaden sky. At the top, the word Hale lit up even in the middle of the day. People walked by every morning and looked up at it. Some admired it. Some were envious. None of them knew that the person who built that name was once a 25-year-old black kid sleeping in a construction cabin, eating dry bread to stave off hunger, and being called names by the foreman that even now Gus still would not repeat. This morning he did not look up for long. He only glanced once, then stepped inside. It had been 3 weeks since the day he buried Marcus, and every morning was the same in its empty way. For 35 years, the person who opened the car door for him was Marcus. The person who sat silently in the driver's seat during the long trips was Marcus. The only person in this entire empire who dared to tell him straight that he was wrong was also Marcus. Now that seat was occupied by a driver from a rental company, a young, polite person, calling him Mr. Hale the right way. He did nothing wrong. He just wasn't Marcus. Gus stepped through the revolving glass doors into the main lobby. The lobby of the Hale building was as wide as a cathedral. The ash-gray marble floor reflected the yellow lights from the high ceiling. A water wall flowed smoothly along the entrance. People went in and out bustlingly. Suits, leather bags, brightly polished shoes, everyone walking fast, everyone looking at their phones, everyone important in their own way. The receptionist looked up. "Good morning, Mr. Hale." He nodded. He always nodded at her. He knew her name was Diana, knew she had 2 young children, knew her husband had been unemployed one winter. Marcus was the one who told him those things. Marcus knew the names of everyone in this building, from the floor cleaner to the chief financial officer, and he often told Gus that a man is only truly rich when he can still remember the names of the people who can do nothing for him. Gus walked towards the elevator bank, and that was when, if he had noticed, he could have seen the boy. But he did not notice. Theo sat in the farthest corner of the lobby, on the edge of a long leather bench, his 2 legs not reaching the floor, tucked under him. He wore a thin, faded blue jacket, the kind of jacket of a child growing faster than the speed his parents bought new clothes. The sleeves were a bit shorter than his wrists. On his lap was a frayed backpack, clutched tightly as if inside it was the whole world. His mother, Renata, was standing at the reception desk a few steps away, talking softly with an HR employee. They came to receive the remaining belongings Marcus had left in the employee locker. A jacket, a pair of reading glasses, a photo taken of the whole family at Lake Michigan the summer 3 years ago, when Marcus did not yet know there was something growing in his lungs. Theo did not look at his mother. He looked down at his hands. In the palm of his hand was a pocket watch. It was old, made of discolored brass, the glass face having a small scratch in the corner. The back was engraved with 2 intertwined letters that Theo had looked at until he memorized every stroke. He flipped it in his hand, opened the lid, closed the lid, opened the lid. The watch hands were still running. His father wound it up every night, even on the final nights when his hands were so weak he almost could not turn the knob. Theo had learned how to do it instead. Now every night he still wound it, because he was afraid that if he let it stop running, something else would also stop with it. "Hey!" An older security guard stopped in front of him. A gray uniform, shiny badge, the voice not exactly harsh, but also not bothering to be soft. "You can't sit here. This area is for the company's guests only. Go out to the bench out there and wait for your mother." Theo gripped the watch tightly, standing up. He didn't say anything. He was used to it. This was the second time this morning. The first time was a younger guard, a bit more polite, but the result was the same. He backed toward the wall, finding a more hidden spot where no one had to see a child who did not belong in this place. He sat down on the floor, his back leaning against the cold wall section behind an ornamental palm tree. From this spot, through the gaps in the leaves, he could see almost the whole lobby. He saw his mother still signing papers. He saw the stream of suited people passing back and forth. And he saw Mr. Hale, the man his father had served and loved throughout his entire working life, walking toward the elevators at the other end of the lobby. Theo knew Mr. Hale. Not much, but enough. His father mentioned his name almost every day. "Mr. Hale is like this. Mr. Hale is like that. Today Mr. Hale forgot to eat lunch again. Today Mr. Hale argued with his nephew in the meeting room again." Once his father said, his voice lowering in the way he only used when saying something important, "You know, when he and I were young, he had nothing. Nothing at all. The only person who believed in him back then was me. And the only person I believed in was him." Theo remembered he had asked, "Why did you believe in him?" And his father, lying on the hospital bed, had smiled and replied, "Because once I told him a sentence, and he listened to it. At that time, he had no reason to listen to a stranger like me, but he listened. And thanks to that, he is still alive until now." Theo did not fully understand that story. His father had not had time to tell it all. There were too many things his father had not had time to tell completely. But there was one thing his father had instructed very carefully, instructed over and over again in the final weeks, instructed with an urgency that made Theo, even though only 11 years old, understand that it was more important than all other instructions. His father held his hand, pressed the watch into the palm of his hand, and said, "Theo, listen to me. If one day you are in that building, and you see something that makes you scared, something wrong, don't tell anyone at all. Don't shout out. Don't call the guards. You run straight to Mr. Hale, grab his sleeve, and say exactly these words." Then he leaned close to his ear and spoke very softly. Theo had memorized it. Theo had not understood why, but Theo had memorized it. And now, sitting behind the ornamental palm tree in the corner of the cold lobby, Theo was watching Mr. Hale walking toward the elevator without him knowing at all that last night, in the darkness of the parking basement, he had heard something. Something that made his blood run cold. Something that made him stay awake all night, hugging the watch tightly, repeating in his head the words his father instructed until morning came. He just did not know what to do with it yet. He was only a child. No one believes a child. The guard had just chased him away twice, only because he sat in the wrong place. So who would be willing to believe his words, that someone was wanting to harm the boss of this entire building? Theo clutched the watch tightly in his hand. At the other end of the lobby, about 30 meters away from him, Mr. Hale stopped in front of the elevator bank. He reached out his hand, his finger about to touch the button to call the private elevator, the glass elevator leading straight up to the 42nd floor, where the entire board of directors was waiting. And Theo, from the hidden corner, saw something through the leaf gaps that made him jump up. He saw two men standing next to the elevator bank. One person Theo recognized immediately. That was Vaughn Hale, Mr. Hale's nephew, the person his father slightly frowned every time he mentioned. The other person Theo had never met during the day. But he recognized that figure. Tall, thin, slightly sloped shoulders, standing in the manner of someone used to standing in the dark. He had seen that figure last night, in the basement, under the murky yellow lights of the parking area. And he realized one more thing, a thing that made his heart pound right up to his throat. Both of them were looking at Mr. Hale. Looking in the way people look at something about to happen. Vaughn said something to the other man. Then both stepped back half a pace, separating, as if not wanting to stand too close to the elevator that Mr. Hale was about to step into. Theo did not have time to think anymore. He ran. He dashed across the lobby, weaving between the suits, almost bumping into a woman holding a cup of coffee, his old shoes slipping slightly on the marble surface. He heard someone cry out behind him. He heard his mother's voice calling his name, panicked. He did not stop. He could not stop. Mr. Hale had reached out his hand to touch the button. Theo lunged forward, stretched his body, and his small hand grabbed the sleeve of his suit jacket. "Don't move. Follow me." Augustus Hale stopped short. For a moment, he did not turn his head. He just stood there, his fingers still about a knuckle away from the button, and felt the tiny hand gripping his sleeve. Then he looked down. A child. Black, thin, wearing a faded blue jacket, panting, wide eyes looking up at him. He did not recognize him immediately. In his head at that moment, he was already on the 42nd floor, in the meeting room, just 3 more minutes, documents on the table, the whole board waiting. "You are," he frowned, "you are Marcus's son. Follow me. Please, sir." The boy repeated, even more softly, and his hand tightened. "Don't get on that elevator." Gus's first reflex was to remove his hand. He was a 60-year-old man who had built an entire empire by never letting emotions derail a schedule. He did not change plans because a child tugged his sleeve. In his entire life, he had stepped over hundreds of people who wanted to stop him from doing what he intended to do, and not a single one of them could stop him. But those 5 words, "Don't move. Follow me." He had heard exactly those words once in his life. Only once. 35 years ago, on a scaffold at a height of 10 stories, from the mouth of a stranger who later became the person he trusted most in the world. And that person, 3 weeks ago, had been lowered into the earth on a morning just as cold as this morning. No one else knew that sentence. No one. Gus slowly withdrew his hand from the button. He knelt on one knee, letting his eyes be level with the boy's eyes. Around them, the building lobby remained noisy, remained indifferent, the stream of people still flowing. Renata had run over, her face pale, her mouth opening to apologize, to pull her child back. Gus raised a hand, gently, signaling for her to stop. "What is your name?" he asked. "Theo, sir. Theo." He nodded slowly, as if storing that name into somewhere important. "Who taught you to say that sentence?" "My dad." The boy's eyes glistened, but his voice did not break. "Dad told me, if I see anything scary in this building, to run to you, grab your sleeve, and say exactly that sentence. Dad said you would know that I am not lying." Something in Gus's chest tilted, like the ground had just shifted half a centimeter under his feet. Marcus had taught his son that sentence, the private sentence of the 2 of them, the sentence that only the 2 of them fully understood the meaning of. Marcus had given it to the boy like giving a key, a passcode, an emergency signal carefully hidden to be used exactly once, and the boy was using it. Now. Here. "Tell me," Gus said, his voice different now, low and slow. "What did you see? Speak very slowly. Do not leave anything out." Theo swallowed hard. He glanced toward the elevator bank, where Vaughn and the other man were still standing. Now both of them were looking toward him and Mr. Hale with an expression that Theo could not read, a flat expression that was even more terrifying than anger. "Not here, sir," he whispered. "They are looking at us." Gus glanced, following the boy's gaze. He saw his nephew. He saw Vaughn smiling, that social smile Vaughn always used in every meeting, and raising his hand to look at his watch impatiently, as if wanting to remind his uncle that he was late. A completely normal gesture. A gesture that yesterday morning Gus would never have noticed. But this morning, with a child's hand still gripping his sleeve, he looked at it differently. He saw the strange man next to Vaughn not looking at his watch at all. That person looked at him, only looked at him. And upon catching Gus's eye, that person was not flustered, did not look away like a normal stranger would do. That person just calmly turned his face to another direction, leisurely, like someone who had nothing to rush for. Gus had sat opposite all kinds of people in 60 years. Partners, opponents, those who came to shake hands and those who came to stab in the back. He had learned that what makes a person dangerous is not the angry look on their face, but the out-of-place calmness. That man was too calm. All right. Gus stood up, still keeping his voice gentle and normal, like someone who had just heard an employee's nephew ask a random question. He placed a hand on Theo's shoulder. "Come with me. Your mother, too." He turned around, not toward the elevator, but toward the hallway leading to the ground floor office area. He walked leisurely, not hurrying, one hand still placed on the boy's shoulder, talking about something regarding the weather while walking, in a voice loud enough that anyone watching would think that powerful man was just being kind to a former employee's child. Behind his back, the glass elevator still had its doors open, brightly lit, waiting for a person who would not step in. Renata walked alongside, confused, holding her son's hand. "Mr. Hale, I sincerely apologize. The boy didn't mean to." "Miss Renata." Gus cut in, softly but decisively, still not stopping his steps, still keeping the smile on his lips for the eyes behind. "Your son has just done a very brave thing. I need you to trust me in the next few minutes. Just walk normally. Don't turn your head back." They turned into the hallway. As soon as they were out of sight from the main lobby, Gus stopped, led the mother and son into an empty small meeting room, and closed the door. He pulled up a chair, sitting down to be at eye level with Theo once again. "Now," he said, "tell me, from the beginning, what did you see last night?" Theo took a breath. His shoulders trembled a little, but his voice remained steady. "Last night, my mom and I came here to get my dad's things. But the locker needed a key, and the guard had to go find the person holding the key. My mom told me to sit and wait on the bench down in the parking basement, near the elevator. I sat alone. The lights down there were very dark." He paused a beat, his fingers still twirling the pocket watch in the palm of his hand. "Then I heard voices. 2 people. They stood behind the pillars. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could hear. One person was Mr. Vaughn. I know his voice because Dad often mimicked his voice to make me laugh. The other person I didn't know. A deep voice, speaking slowly, like reading something memorized." "What did they say?" Gus asked. His voice was very calm, but his hand resting on his knee had tightened. Theo looked up at him. "Mr. Vaughn said your name." "Said it 3 times, sir," the boy said. "He said, tomorrow morning he will step in there himself. 8:30. He is always on time. It must be made to look like an accident. If something looks unnatural, people will find out in a day." Gus sat still. He did not move. In the small room, there was only the humming sound of the heater and the very soft ticking sound of the pocket watch in the boy's hand. "Then what did the other person say?" he asked. "The other person said." Theo tried to remember exactly, his brow furrowing. "The elevator has been adjusted. When it stops between 2 floors, the rest will happen on its own. No one will be able to prove anything." Theo stopped. His eyes began to get wet, but he blinked hard and kept the tears from falling, exactly the way he had seen his father do in his final months when he did not want to let his son see him in pain. "Then Mr. Vaughn laughed," he said, his voice dropping. He said, "After all these years, finally this building will bear exactly the name it is supposed to bear." Augustus Hale closed his eyes. He sat there, in the small meeting room on the ground floor of the building bearing his name, and felt the entire shape of this morning shifting beneath his feet, like a floor that had just stopped being solid anymore. 35 years ago, Augustus Hale was not yet Augustus Hale. Back then, people called him Gus, or more simply, that guy. He was 25 years old, working as a construction laborer on a high-rise construction site in the South Side area, and every morning he climbed up the scaffold with a hungry stomach and a pair of gloves torn at the fingertips. He had no degrees. He had no patron. He only had one thing, which was a small notebook he hid in his shirt pocket, in which he drew building blueprints that no one cared to look at. He once gave that notebook to a foreman. The man flipped through a few pages, then laughed, then threw it back at his chest. "You just worry about finishing carrying the cement, architect," he said, and the people around laughed along. Gus picked the notebook up, brushed off the dust, and put it back in his pocket. He did not say anything. He was used to it. When the whole world has decided who you are, arguing back is only a waste of effort. That fateful morning was a wet March day. The rain the night before made the scaffold floor slippery, and the bracing bars creaked in the wind. Gus was standing on the 10th scaffold floor, bending over carrying a stack of bricks, head bowed down, mind in another place, perhaps thinking about that month's rent still lacking, or about a dinner with only a can of beans. He did not hear the sound of the screw popping out. He did not see the main bracing bar above his head slowly slipping from its joint. But one person saw. "Don't move!" The shout cut across the sound of the wind. Gus looked up. About 5 meters away from him, on the same scaffold floor, another worker was looking straight at him, one hand pointing up to the structural ceiling above Gus's head, face pale white. "Follow me, now!" that person shouted. "Over to this side! Don't step forward!" For a second, Gus stood still. Every instinct in him told him that this was a joke or an unreasonable order from a stranger who had no right to order him. He had no reason to obey. Who was that man? He did not even know his name. But there was something in that voice, something that could not be faked. And Gus, for a reason that for the rest of his life he could never fully explain, dropped the stack of bricks and stepped toward the stranger instead of stepping forward. 3 seconds later, the main bracing bar slipped out completely. A whole section of scaffold in front, exactly where Gus had just stood, collapsed down with a dry snapping sound, pulling along a rain of steel and wood falling straight down 10 stories below. If Gus stepped forward, he would have fallen with it. He stood there, heart pounding, looking down at the empty space where the scaffold floor had just disappeared. Then he turned to the person who had saved him. "I am Marcus," the man said, holding out a still trembling hand. "Marcus Bell." Gus grabbed that hand, and he did not let it go for the next 35 years. Marcus was the only person on the construction site who ever asked to see Gus's notebook. Not to laugh, but to really see. He turned each page, slowly, and when folding it back, he looked at Gus and said a sentence that Gus carried with him his whole life. "These things are not of a laborer. These things are of a person who will build something." It was Marcus who pushed Gus to go to night school. It was Marcus who lent Gus his last coins for Gus to submit the application for his first contractor license. It was Marcus who sat next to Gus in the dilapidated old truck throughout the nights the two drove to see the pieces of land they did not have enough money to buy yet, dreaming about buildings that did not yet exist. And when Gus managed to sign the first construction contract of his life, a small contract, a modest row of warehouses, but was the beginning of everything, he did one thing even before celebrating. He went into a pawn shop, used almost all the spare change he had, and bought a brass pocket watch. He brought it to Marcus's place, placed it into his friend's palm, and said, "You saved my life on that scaffold. Then you saved it one more time every day since then. I have nothing to repay you worthily. But I want you to keep this. For you to remember that your time, every single second, is the most precious thing that anyone has ever given me." Marcus laughed and told him he was cheesy. But he wore that watch every day for 35 years. He wound it up every night. And when Gus got rich, truly rich, rich to the point of being able to buy for Marcus a whole 1,000 diamond-studded gold watches, Marcus still only wore exactly that same old brass watch. "The gold watch only lets people know what time it is," Marcus once said. "This one reminds me why I am still here to see the time." Now, in the small meeting room on the ground floor, Augustus Hale opened his eyes and looked at that watch lying in the palm of Marcus's son. The same watch. The same words. "Don't move. Follow me." 35 years ago, an unknown man had said that sentence and saved his life on a scaffold. This morning, the son of that exact man had just said that sentence again and saved his life one more time. As if Marcus, from under the ground, was still watching over. As if before passing away, he had known that there would be a morning this building became dangerous, and had planted one last guard for his friend. An 11-year-old boy with a passcode sentence and a watch. Gus felt his throat tighten, but he did not let it show. Not right now, because along with that emotion, something else was rising up in him. A chain of puzzle pieces that throughout the past many months he had seen but refused to put together. Vaughn, the son of his younger brother. Gus remembered. For the past half year, Vaughn continuously gave him documents to sign. "Just formalities, Uncle. Restructuring to be neat. You just sign. I'll take care of the details part." And Gus, because of being tired, because of being old, because of being used to trusting family members, had signed. He had signed on pages of paper he did not finish reading, exactly as he had once signed some page 35 years ago in the pawn shop, exactly as he had once trusted a stranger on the scaffold. His whole life, his survival always revolved around the fact that he trusted the right people. And this time, he feared that he had trusted wrongly. He remembered Vaughn's eyes every time he mentioned his father, Gus's younger brother, a bitter man who had died in poverty many years ago, a person who until his last breath still believed that Gus had abandoned him, had taken everything away, had built an entire empire on the back of his younger brother without sharing back a single cent. That was not the truth. But Gus knew. The truth and what people believe to be the truth are usually two very different things. And Vaughn grew up in the house of a bitter father, being fed with the story about a rich uncle who had robbed everything away. Theo looked at him, patient, waiting, his eyes still brimming with tears. Then the boy raised the pocket watch, holding it out toward Gus, his palm open. "Dad instructed me to give this to you," Theo said. "Dad said, if there is a day I have to say that sentence to you, then I give this, so you know for sure it is true. Dad said you will." The phone in Gus's pocket vibrated. Theo stopped short, his sentence unfinished, his hand still holding the watch out in midair. Gus put a finger to his lips, gently, then pulled out his phone to look at the screen. Vaughn. He let it vibrate one more beat. Then he took a breath, adjusted his facial expression like a person adjusting a tie before stepping into a meeting room, and pressed answer. When he spoke, his voice was completely calm, completely normal, the voice of a slightly absent-minded uncle who is busy. "Vaughn." "Uncle Gus, where are you?" Vaughn's voice rang out, warm, just anxious enough. "The whole board is waiting up here. Have you gotten on the elevator yet? I saw you in the lobby but suddenly couldn't see you anywhere anymore." "I'm sorry," Gus said, his eyes still looking at Theo. "I forgot a stack of documents in the office down here. That restructuring plan, I want to reread a few lines before signing. You just tell everyone to start the report part. I'll be up in 15 minutes. There was a very short silence on the other end of the line, so short that a person not paying attention would miss it. But Gus was paying attention. "You want to reread it?" Vaughn said. His voice was still soft, but there was a certain string that just pulled taut underneath. "You don't need to reread it for what? It's all just old procedures. Come up here and sign it quickly, then we can go eat lunch. Or, let me come down to you? I have the backup copy right here." "No need," Gus replied, still evenly. "I will come up myself. Just start first." He hung up before Vaughn had time to say more. For a few seconds, he sat still, looking at the phone in his hand. "Or let me come down to you." That suggestion, in itself, had nothing wrong with it. A thoughtful nephew would say exactly that. But Gus had just learned that that nephew wanted him dead, and through that lens, every kind sentence suddenly revealed another hidden side. Vaughn did not want him to be alone down here. Vaughn wanted to know where he was, what he was doing, and with whom. Gus placed the phone down on the table, face down. "Theo," he said softly, "you keep the watch for a little while longer. I believe you already. I don't need it to believe you anymore. You hold it for me." The boy nodded, pulled his hand back, hugging the watch to his chest. Gus stood up, walked to the meeting room window looking out into the hallway, opening a small crack. The main lobby in the distance was still bustling. He did not see Vaughn. He did not see the strange man. Both had left the elevator area. That did not make him feel more at ease. On the contrary, he pulled out his phone, found a name in the contacts, and pressed call. The phone rang twice. Eleanor. On the other end of the line was the voice of an older woman, sharp and alert. Eleanor Voss had been Gus's legal advisor for 30 years. She was one of the only two people left in the world that Gus trusted absolutely. The other person had just been buried 3 weeks ago. "Gus, I thought you were in the board meeting," she said. "Eleanor, listen to me, and don't ask why until I am finished talking." His voice lowered. "I need you to pull out for me every change in my legal documents over the past 2 years. Every restructuring document, every amendment in the will, every clause about executive power if I lose capacity, and every signature claimed to be mine. I need to know what has changed, who witnessed it, where it was signed, what date. And I need it within 90 minutes. A silence. "Gus," Eleanor said, her voice having completely changed. 30 years working together, she had only heard him use this voice exactly twice. "What is going on?" "Something that I should have noticed a long time ago," he replied. "Don't tell anyone. Not the legal department, not the secretary, not a single person in this building. Especially not Vaughn. You call back this number. Only this number. 90 minutes, Eleanor said, and hung up. She did not waste time asking more. Gus put the phone down. When he turned around, he saw Renata sitting on the chair, one hand hugging her son, her face pale white. She had heard enough to understand that this matter was not a matter of her son sitting in the wrong place. Mr. Hale, she said softly, if the boy heard right, if there really is someone wanting to harm you, then he was down in that parking basement alone. Alone, last night, hearing everything. If they know he heard. She did not finish her sentence. She did not need to finish it. Gus looked at her, then looked at Theo, and for the first time since this story began, he felt something even colder than the fear for himself. People were wanting to harm him, that he could deal with. He had dealt with those wanting to destroy him his whole life. But this boy, Marcus's son, the child who had just saved his life, was now standing in the same danger zone only because he had done the right thing. No one will be able to touch the boy, Gus said. His voice was very soft, but solid as rock. Do you hear me, Renata? Not a single person. Right at that moment, there were footsteps out in the hallway. Not the hurried footsteps of an employee going to deliver documents, but the slow, steady footsteps of two people walking next to each other and not in any hurry. The sound of leather shoes pounding on the stone floor, one heavy beat, one lighter beat. Gus reached out and turned off the meeting room lights. He signaled for Renata to pull her son to hide in the hidden corner behind the door, where the frosted glass of the partition did not reveal the shadows of the people inside. He pressed his back against the wall, right next to the door crack, and held his breath. The footsteps came closer. Through the thin gap between the door and the frame, Gus saw two shadows walking past. Vaughn, and next to him, the tall, thin man with the stance of someone used to being in the dark, cannot just disappear. Vaughn's voice echoed in, low, urgent, having dropped the warm shell from when calling. He was just in the lobby. Suddenly went somewhere with that kid. Which kid is that? Did you see him? The son of the driver. The other person's voice was deep and flat. The one who just died. A silence. The footsteps slowed down. Why did that kid run to him? Vaughn said, and this time in his voice there was something that Gus recognized immediately because he had heard it in so many people, in so many meeting rooms, right before a deal fell apart. The beginning of fear. Was he here last night? He and his mother came to get things. What time? Have you checked the parking basement cameras yet? The footsteps stopped completely. Right outside the pitch-black meeting room door. Gus stood motionless in the darkness, his back pressed against the cold wall, exactly one layer of door away from the two people wanting to take his life. He heard Theo's breathing behind him, fast and soft. He heard the very small ticking sound of the watch in the boy's hand, counting every single second in the dark. And he heard the strange man's voice saying, right on the other side of the door, slowly, without a bit of hurry, "Let me go check that camera." The man's footsteps faded away. Gus heard the sound of leather shoes pounding on the stone floor, getting softer, then disappearing toward the end of the hallway, leading down to the basement. Vaughn lingered for one more beat, then also walked away, in the opposite direction, toward the elevator bank. In the dark meeting room, no one moved. Gus counted silently to 30, then to 60. Only when certain the hallway was completely quiet did he leave the wall and turn on a small light in the corner of the room. The soft yellow light revealed the mother and son cowering in the corner. Renata hugged her son, one hand placed behind the boy's head, as if able to shield her child from everything just heard. And Theo was trembling. Not the trembling of a child afraid of the dark, but the trembling of something that had been compressed too long, too tightly, and now, in the first moment of safety, finally broke open. The boy burst into tears, soundlessly. Theo had learned how to cry soundlessly, just as his father once had. His shoulders shook, tears streamed down his cheeks, but he bit his lip tightly so that not a single sound escaped. He still hugged the watch to his chest, his two small hands gripping tightly around it. Gus knelt down in front of him, slowly, letting his two old knees touch the floor. "Theo," he said softly, "it's okay now. You are safe. They are gone." But Theo shook his head. And when he looked up at him, Gus realized the boy was not crying out of fear. He was crying for something else, something deeper, something that had weighed on the chest of an 11-year-old child for the past many weeks. "I couldn't save Dad," Theo said. His voice broke, tiny, choked between breaths. "Dad was sick. Dad lay there every day, getting weaker and weaker, and I couldn't do anything at all. I only knew how to sit next to Dad. I wound up the watch for Dad because Dad's hands couldn't turn it anymore. I could only do that one thing. Just that one thing." He took a trembling breath. "The doctor said he couldn't be saved. Mom cried in the bathroom so I wouldn't hear, but I heard everything. I wanted to save Dad, but I didn't know how. I am just a kid. I have no money. I have nothing at all. I couldn't save Dad." Gus sat still, not interrupting. He knew there are times when the kindest thing a person can do is say nothing at all, just stay there and listen to the very end. "Then Dad instructed me that sentence," Theo continued, tears falling onto the back of the hand holding the watch. "Dad instructed it over and over. Dad made me read it back to him, every night, until I knew it by heart. I didn't understand why. I asked Dad what that sentence meant, why it was so important. Dad just said, 'You just remember it for me. Someday it will save someone I love. Can you do it, Theo? Can you help me save that person?' The boy looked up, and this time his tears fell without holding back anymore. "I couldn't save Dad," Theo said. "But Dad said I could save you. So this morning when I saw those two people looking at you, I was very scared. I was scared no one would believe me. I was scared the guard would chase me away again. But I thought of Dad. I thought, here it is. This is the person Dad wants me to save. I must not miss it. I must not let Dad down. I couldn't save Dad, so at least I must save you." Augustus Hale, the 60-year-old man who had built an entire empire by never letting emotions derail a schedule, felt something in his chest break open. He understood now. This whole morning, he kept thinking Marcus had given his son a passcode sentence, an emergency signal, like a final gatekeeper planted for a friend. But it was not. Marcus had done something else, something much bigger. In the final days of his life, knowing he was no longer here to protect his friend of 35 years, Marcus had passed that duty on to his son. He had turned his child into the continuation of himself. He had given the boy a way to still have meaning, to still be able to do something, even when he could not save his father. And this morning, the child had fulfilled what his father entrusted. Marcus, from under the ground, still saved his life one more time, through the hands of his son. 35 years ago, a stranger on a scaffold had shouted, "Don't move," and Gus lived. This morning, the son of that person had whispered exactly that sentence, and Gus lived one more time. 2 moments, separated by a whole lifetime, had just touched each other in this small room, closing into a circle that Gus only now saw completely. He reached out his hand, placing it on the boy's shoulder. The large, calloused hand that used to carry bricks on the scaffold, that used to sign million-dollar contracts, now trembled very softly. "Theo, look at me," he said. His voice became hoarse. "Listen carefully, because I will only say it once, and I need you to believe every word." The boy looked up, his eyes red, waiting. "You are not at fault for your father's passing. Not one bit. There are illnesses where even the richest, most powerful people in this world cannot buy back health. I tried. Did you know? I took your dad to the best doctors in the country. I paid all the expenses. And even me, with everything I have, couldn't save him. You are an 11-year-old child. You wound the watch for Dad every night when his hands were weak. Do you know, that is not just that one thing. That is the most precious thing. You were by your dad's side. You let your dad know he was not alone. No amount of money in the world can buy that. And this morning," Gus continued, his hand still placed on the boy's shoulder, "you saved a human life. My life. Do you hear clearly, Theo? Not a single thing that happens after this, whether good or bad, whether how much longer I can continue to live, can change that truth. This morning you did the bravest thing that I have ever seen a human being do. And your dad, wherever he is right now, is prouder of you than you can imagine." Theo looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded, a small nod, and something in his shoulders, something that had been tense for many weeks, finally relaxed. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and held the watch out once again. This time Gus accepted it. He did not open it. He only held it in the palm of his hand for a moment, feeling its familiar weight, then softly placed it back into the boy's hand. "You keep it for me for a little while longer," he said. "I have work to do, and I need both hands." Right at that moment, his phone vibrated. "Eleanor." He pressed answer. "Speak." Eleanor's voice rang out, fast, concise, and cold as ice. "Gus, I found it, and it is worse than you thought. 14 months ago, your will was altered. The original version divided the assets to charity funds, to employees, to a long list. The new version gathered almost everything into one place. If you pass away, or if a medical board declares you have lost executive capacity, the entire control of the corporation transfers immediately to Vaughn. No dispute, no waiting time. Your signature lies at the bottom, witnessed by a notary." Gus closed his eyes. "I did not sign that." "I know you did not sign it," Eleanor said, "because the date written on the paper, you were in Atlanta with me, attending your uncle's funeral. I have the plane tickets too. The signature is fake, but faked very skillfully. There is one more thing, Gus, and this is exactly where I want you to sit down. I reviewed the corporation's cash flow books for the most recent 3 years. There are expenditure amounts through a series of intermediary companies. Each amount is not large, but added up over 3 years is more than $40 million. All were approved by Vaughn. All disappeared." Gus opened his eyes. So it was not just an inheritance case. Vaughn had gutted the corporation for many years, and when the deficits were about to become impossible to hide anymore, when today's board meeting was about to overturn all the numbers, he needed him to disappear before the truth was exposed. His death was not the goal. It was the way to erase the traces. "Eleanor," Gus said, "you keep all of those things, print them out, back them up, and call the lawyer of the insurance corporation, also the district attorney that you know, the one named Dabrowski. I need them ready in the next hour, but do not call the police yet." "Not yet." "Not yet?" Eleanor asked. "Gus, people are wanting to take your life. Call the police right now." "If I call the police right now," Gus said slowly, "they will arrest a man standing in the lobby, and I have no direct evidence besides the account of a child about a conversation in the parking basement. Vaughn will hire the best lawyer. He will say he is innocent, that hired guy acted alone. He will retreat, wipe clean the traces, and wait for another day, another way. I do not want him to wait for another day. I want him to stand in that room, in front of the whole board, presenting his restructuring plan with his own hands, confident that he has won. Then I will step in." A silence on the other end of the line. "You always do that," Eleanor said softly. "Let the opponent lay all the chess pieces out onto the table themselves before you flip the table. 30 years already and still the same." "This is the last time," Gus replied. "One more hour, Eleanor." He hung up. He turned to Renata. "I need you and Theo to stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone besides me. I will have my people come stand outside. Real people, people I trust. Can you do it?" Renata nodded. She had stopped trembling. There was a thing in the eyes of this woman, Gus realized, exactly like her son, a thing that does not break. 40 minutes later, Augustus Hale stepped out of the elevator on the 42nd floor. The board meeting room stretched out in front of him, a long room with a glass wall looking out over the panoramic view of snow-covered Chicago. 12 board members sat around the long walnut wood table. And at the head of the table, standing, presenting in front of a projection screen full of charts, was Vaughn. He stopped when the door opened. For a second, a thing flashed across his face. Gus caught it, a flash of astonishment, almost panic. Then it disappeared immediately, replaced by the familiar warm smile. "Uncle Gus," Vaughn said, opening his arms. "Finally you came up. I have just finished presenting the restructuring part. Everyone is in consensus already, only waiting for your signature anymore." On the table, in front of Gus's empty chair, was the stack of documents. A pen was placed neatly next to it. Gus walked to the head of the table. He did not sit down. He did not pick up the pen. "Thank you, Vaughn," he said, his voice calm, echoing throughout the silent room. "You prepared very carefully. Actually, you prepared much more carefully than everyone in this room thought." He placed his leather briefcase onto the table, opened it, and began taking out each stack of files, placing them down on the walnut wood surface, one stack, then another stack, then another stack. "Before I sign anything," Gus said, looking around the 12 faces that were bewildered. "I think the board should see a few numbers that this restructuring plan forgot to include." The smile on Vaughn's face stiffened. In the 10 minutes that followed, the 42nd floor meeting room became so silent that one could hear the sound of snow tapping softly against the glass. Gus did not shout. He did not accuse. He just placed each sheet of paper down on the table and let the numbers speak for themselves. Over $40 million flowing through a chain of non-existent intermediary companies. The altered will with the date perfectly matching the day he was attending a funeral in Atlanta. The copy of the plane ticket. The signed testimony of the notary, whom Eleanor had found and convinced to tell the truth in exchange for leniency. Each puzzle piece, placed next to one another, built a picture that no word of denial could erase. Vaughn stood at the other end of the table, his face gradually turning pale white. He tried to speak. "This is a misunderstanding. Uncle Gus, let me explain." "You explain it for the board to hear," Gus said softly. "Or explain it to those two gentlemen standing outside the door." The meeting room door opened. 2 investigators from the district attorney's office stepped in, along with an inspector. They had waited in the hallway throughout Gus's presentation. The tall, thin man had been arrested 15 minutes ago, right in the basement technical room, where he was bending over the elevator control panel. He did not resist. And when asked, he did exactly the thing that hired guys always do when they know they are the only ones who will have to pay the price. He confessed everything. He confessed the name that hired him. When the inspector read Vaughn's rights and placed handcuffs on his wrists, the whole board still sat motionless, 12 powerful human beings, no one uttering a word. Vaughn let them lead him away. But reaching level with Gus, he stopped. And for the first time this morning, the smile, the warm look, the shell, all disappeared. What remained was a bare thing that Gus had never seen in his nephew, even though it had been there for so many years. "You let my father die poor," Vaughn said. His voice trembled, not because of fear, but because of a thing that had festered too long. "My father built this company with you, stood side by side with you from the beginning. Yet he died in a rented apartment, not a penny to his name, while your name shines on the roof of the tallest building in the city. You took everything. You took everything from him." The room held its breath. Gus looked at his nephew for a long time. When he spoke, his voice had no anger, only an old, heavy sadness. The kind of sadness that people carry with them for many years and have stopped hoping to put it down. "Your father left the company the year you were 3 years old, Vaughn," Gus said, "because he wanted to walk his own path himself. I did not stop him. I gave him his share of capital, fairly, with paperwork. Eleanor keeps the original to this day. He invested, then lost everything. Not because of me, but because of his very own decisions. I offered to help. Many times. 5 times, 10 times, I don't count anymore. I sent money. He sent it back. I went right to his door. He closed the door. Until the very last day, he would rather believe that I had robbed him than admit that I always reached out my hand. Because believing I was a thief was easier to live with than looking at his own choices. He took one step closer. And you grew up in that story. I understand, Vaughn. I truly understand. What is wrong with a child believing his father's words? But you did not stop at believing. You turned it into an excuse to become exactly the person you thought I was. Vaughn did not reply. His eyes were red. Then they led him away. The door closed behind his back, and Augustus Hale stood alone at the head of the room, among 12 human beings who had just witnessed an entire family break apart before their eyes. He did not feel victory. He only felt a deep and very ordinary exhaustion, the exhaustion of a person who had just reached the end of a path that should never have had to be walked. 4 months passed. An early spring morning, the sun poured down on Chicago for the first time after a long winter. On the rooftop of the Hale building, the wind was still cold but had brought along something lighter, a promise of the coming warm season. Augustus Hale stood by the railing, looking down at the city stretching out below. Vaughn was waiting for his day in court. The 2 deficit amounts had been traced to their very roots. And the restructuring plan that he would have unconsciously signed that morning, he had torn up. Instead of it, last week, he had signed a new will. This version he read line by line. The majority of the corporation's shares would be transferred into a trust fund for the very workers who had built it, brick by brick. and a portion was reserved exclusively for a scholarship, bearing the name Marcus Bell, for children growing up like Gus had once grown up, having nothing and believed by no one. There was the sound of small footsteps running up the stairs behind his back. Theo stepped out onto the rooftop, his breath still rushing. In his hand was a sketchbook. He had grown a little taller over the past 4 months. His mother now worked as an office manager on the 18th floor, and Theo, after school, often came up to this building, sitting somewhere drawing. "Uncle Hale," he said, "I finished drawing this. Can you take a look?" Gus took the sketchbook. On the page of paper was a drawing of the Hale building, looking up from the street, 42 stories reaching into the sky. The strokes were still clumsy, but there was a thing in it, a sense of height, of light, that not every child could draw. "Your dad also drew," Gus said softly. "Did you know? When young, your dad drew on everything. Invoices, napkins, the back of debt papers. I used to have a notebook like this. Your dad was the first person to look into it and not laugh." Theo looked up. "Dad never told me that story. There are many stories your dad did not have time to tell," Gus said. "But now you have me." He reached his hand into his shirt pocket, taking out the brass pocket watch. Throughout the past 4 months, he had kept it, winding it up every night, exactly as Marcus had once done, exactly as Theo had once done for his father. Now he held it in the palm of his hand, the glass face catching the morning sun, and held it out toward the boy. "This was mine first," he said. "I bought it with the last coins I had, a very long time ago, to gift a person who had saved my life. That person kept it for 35 years. Then that person taught his son a sentence, and that person's son saved my life again. I think it is time it belongs to you." Theo looked at the watch, then looked at him, not reaching out his hand to accept it immediately. "But that is my dad's," he said. "I cannot take it from you. It was never truly mine or your dad's," Gus said. "It is a thing meant to be passed on, from this hand to another hand. Every time, it reminds the person holding it that they are still here thanks to another person. Your dad would want you to keep it. I am certain of that more than anything." The boy held out his 2 hands, and Gus placed the watch into the palm of his hand. Theo opened the lid. Inside, the watch hands were still running, steadily, without a single second of hesitation, ticking in his small palm, counting toward the mornings yet to come. Gus looked at the boy, then looked out at the city, and wondered whether Marcus, wherever he was standing right now, was looking down at the 2 of them on the highest rooftop of the building bearing his friend's name or not. And if he was, he wondered what he would say. Perhaps he would say nothing. Perhaps he would just point his hand toward Theo and smile and let the boy himself say it out loud, as he always let other people find their own answers themselves. What about you? If one morning, a child that the whole world walks past without bothering to look at suddenly grabs your sleeve and whispers a thing you do not want to believe, will you stop to listen, or will you step into the elevator?